I'm Pit Boss Chef Kirk Naumann. It's National Barbecue Month, and I'm excited because today I'm going to show you how to cook the big three: brisket, pulled pork, and ribs. And we're doing it all on these two Pro Series Elites right behind me. I can't wait. So let's fire it up on Pit Boss Fully Loaded. Have you ever wondered how to get the most out of your Pit Boss? Welcome to Fully Loaded, where I teach you how to unlock the full potential of your Pit Boss grill. Learn new recipes and pick up strategies to cook full meals. Load those grills to the max and unleash flavor like never before with expert tips and tricks. Pit Boss Fully Loaded is your ultimate grilling guide. All right, guys, today is a very exciting day on this episode of Fully Loaded. We're going to be celebrating National Barbecue Month with three of the most popular cuts that people can take off their smoker. We got an 8-pound bone-in pork butt. We got a 16-pound American Wagyu brisket. And we're also got a couple of sides of St. Louis style ribs that we're going to be preparing today. Let's go, guys. We're going to start with our 8-pound pork butt. There's not really much to do with these, so we're just going to split this one out. We're going to see if there's any connective tissue that might need to be trimmed away. All right, typically the first thing that I look for when I'm cleaning up a pork butt is that any kind of extra connective tissue that, you may not desire to eat later on, like, this excess fat that's around the outside surrounding the bone. Kind of flip that over, kind of give it a little once over, make sure that there's no little loose ends on it. So I'll just trim this little piece off right here. On the fat cap, I normally don't like to do a whole lot with pork butt. So what I'm just gonna do is that I'm just gonna lightly score the fat cap. And later on when we pull this pork butt, I'm gonna show you why. So we're just gonna start at a very shallow cross cut on it. All right, we're gonna turn it. We're just gonna do the exact same thing, go in the opposite direction. All right, that's gonna be about what we're looking for. We're not trying to score too deep into this piece of protein. No loose ends, don't need to truss. We did choose to go with a bone-in pork butt. Most people do. Typically when you braise on the bone, your protein is going to tend to hold on to a whole lot more moisture. Another thing before we rub it with our favorite spice blend, some people say you want to use a binder. This is totally optional, up to you. Some people swear by it and live by it and practice it. Some people don't. Me particularly, I really think that it will actually hold the seasoning quite well without putting any type of a binder on it, but to each their own. On to the next step. Rub of choice I picked for today, Sweet Heat, all around good. It's not too spicy, although it does say heat. It's not very spicy, it has more of a sweet overlay. We're gonna use this for our pork butt today. Pro tip, try to keep one hand clean so you can use your spice rub one hand and you can maneuver your protein around with the other. Nice even coat. Avoid caking your rub. This will prevent you from achieving the smoke ring that everyone likes to see. All right, not too much, not too little. We're just gonna kind of utilize what's on the board. Get that to adhere to the rest of our cut. That's about as basic and simple as it gets to rubbing a pork butt. Don't want to overthink it. All right, we're going to place our pork butt in our half aluminum foil pan. I'm going to place it in here like so, and we're going to fire it in our Pit Boss vertical. It is currently running at 195 degrees. Another thing you might be wondering is my pellet choice. Today we're going to be using the competition blend. It gives a nice medium smoke flavor. And that's pretty much all we're going to be looking for in this basic cook. Pro placement, you might be wondering. We're going to place it in the center of the muscle as close to the bone without touching. This is going to give you more of an accurate temperature reading right before we have to wrap. We're shooting for about 165 degrees before we wrap our protein. All right, now it's time to move on to the most exciting part of today's video. We have sourced a local Arizona American Wagyu brisket. This one comes in at about 16 pounds. We're going to go ahead and open it up and just do a basic trim on it. All right, we're out of the package. Where do you start? Honestly, you're just looking for the nice, thick, fatty pieces where your smoke and heat are gonna have a hard time penetrating. Since that's where I would start, let's just start right here and we start working our way around. So we're gonna be trimming off the excess fat for the purpose of heat penetration. You know, fat is like a natural insulation. And so you don't want to take too much of it off of it because you kind of want this fat to melt and also baste your protein during this long process. And so we're just gonna kind of rotate our brisket around. For those of you who don't know, there are 3 main parts to the brisket. This part right here that's on the top right here, this is known as the flat. Up here on the top is what's going to be known as your point, and then there's a fat layer in between the both of them that's known as the decal. Again, you can kind of feel as you move around where the thick parts of the fat are. Really all you're trying to do is just trim off the excess. Right around about 1/4 inch is a go-to. Some people like to trim a little bit more. Some people don't even like to trim at all. Again, it's a thing of preference. The more you practice, the more you're gonna know where you want to trim and where you don't want to trim. So again, you can feel where the thickness of the fat is, and then you can just kind of go through, determine where you want to trim your fat. I preferably like to leave the fat about 1/4 inch, especially around the flat, because the flat is your more lean part of the muscle, when your point has quite a bit more marbling and you don't really have to worry about basting that part of the protein as much. My tool of choice is the boning knife out of the 4-piece Pit Boss knife kit. Another good thing to remember is that when your brisket is cold as possible, it also makes it a whole lot easier to trim this fat off. You start getting into a room temperature brisket, it becomes a lot more difficult to trim this fat. Trimming any kind of thin pieces of meat that are going to be off the side is also going to yield a more of an even cook. And so it's okay to trim and block your brisket up. So we got our brisket trimmed the way we like it. We're not going to throw away all these fat trimmings. We can just render it down really slow. A good key factor that I look for when I'm rendering down beef fat, you'll see a lot of people when they render down fat, they say it's liquid gold. You're not really looking for a gold color. It's kind of almost shows a sign that your fat has been burned or is starting to burn. So when your rendered fat is done, it should be as clear as your avocado or your canola oil. And then that fat can be saved in your refrigerator, used as a base for other proteins, or to sear other steaks in your cast iron, or basting other items that you decide to grill. Seasoning, binder. Everyone has their way they want to do it. We are not going to use a binder on this particular brisket. We're just going to use our Pit Boss GSP Rub. So just regular garlic, salt, and pepper, and we're going to let the piece of protein showcase itself. Again, good rule of thumb, 1 dirty hand to work your protein, and a nice clean hand so you can use your dry spice bottle. Again, you're going to want to avoid caking. You don't want to cake. This is going to make it harder for you to achieve the smoke ring that everyone likes to see in their smoked brisket. Caking is when you're using too much rub, and when you rub it on there like that, you'll see it's going to be like, you can see like a thick layer of seasoning, and that's what you don't want to do. That you're imparting flavor, you're not trying to crust it. Seasoning your meat, you're not crusting it. All right. Looks like we pretty much got it on all ends. Not overdone. You're not noticing any caking. Typically when you notice a cake, you'll see to where you cannot see your protein. All you see is seasoning. Ready to rock and roll. We're going to be firing this protein off at the same temperature as we did our pork butt at 195 degrees. and let it go for the long haul, all the way up to 165 degrees right before we decide to wrap. Again, probe placement, we're gonna go on the thickest part of the protein, but we're gonna try to avoid being in that thick fat layer. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna try and come in this top right here in the thickest part of this muscle. We're gonna go from there. All right. All right, why Wagyu, you might ask? Why not go prime or choice or higher? Well, Wagyu, people really go after Wagyu not only for its buttery flavor, but a lot of things that people don't realize that it does have some health benefits to it. Not only does it have omega-3 fatty acids, but it also contains omega-6 fatty acids, which is very beneficial to the human body. With its higher marbling and its higher fat content, you're gonna have a better moisture retention. If you have a lower fat content, you're gonna have more of a chance of drying out your protein. So the higher quality beef that you can get your hands on for a longer braise like this, the better your chances are of achieving a more moist smoky brisket. Again, it's gonna be totally up to you, but don't shy away from it if you ever have an opportunity to play with one. Now that we're on our vertical smoker, a period of time all the way up to possibly 12 hours, could be longer, could be less. We're gonna bring these proteins up to about 165 degrees before we decide to wrap these proteins. At this point in time in the cook, it's also known as the braise. The definition of braising your protein is when the natural juices come out and it also cooks the protein through. In every muscle, it's known as elastins. These are your connective tissues that hold the muscle together. These connective tissues start to break down starting at 165 degrees at a slow rate. The higher the temperature, the faster this process takes place. At its fastest pace, it's going to be at about 205 degrees. When we pull brisket, I like to pull brisket fork tender at about 100, 195 degrees before we allow it to rest. This is going to allow some of the elastins to still take place in there, so when you do slice that brisket, it's going to hold itself together. When in your pork, we're going to take it all the way up to 205 and totally break down these elastins so you can actually get a solid pull on these proteins. Vertical smoker versus our regular barrel style smoker. This has a huge pellet capacity. Not that this one couldn't do the same thing, but we also have a water tray that's built into this one to where you don't have to worry about babysitting it so much. And the drip tray that's in the bottom, we put that in there for an easier cleanup. Versus using a vertical or your barrel size smoker, you can achieve the exact same thing. In your barrel smoker, instead of doing it on the bottom grill grate when you would normally be grilling down here, on your longer braised items, I typically like to choose the center or top rack and then put a drip tray underneath. When you put a drip tray underneath, this is gonna make your heat more indirect and it's gonna allow more of an even cook versus a bottom of it getting too much heat directly from the bottom. The hard part's done, at least for me. Now the rest of the work is all on here. We're just gonna keep an eye on our internal temperatures. By the way, the great thing about these Elite units with the Wi-Fi and Bluetooth capability, I can just watch my food cook from the comfort of my own couch. See you later. All right, folks, here we are. We're about 14 hours into our smoke process of our brisket and our pulled pork. We're right at about 155 degrees. We're gonna be pulling our proteins and wrapping. Before we do so, we need to discuss some of our options when it comes to the wrap. You can use aluminum foil, you can use butcher paper, and then you can also use the same braising pan, which we're gonna be doing with our pulled pork. And so we're simply gonna pull it, add a little bit of braising liquid, cover with film and foil, and place it back on the smoker. Once we wrap our proteins and place it back on the smoker, we're gonna raise our temperature to about 250 degrees, and then we can move right in to our St. Louis style ribs. With our brisket, I decided to use butcher paper. I like to use a wide butcher paper when I wrap my briskets. I'm just gonna show you an easy way that you can fold two pieces together to make it wider so you can fully wrap your brisket. So I'll probably just tear two pieces, be about the same size. Doesn't have to be exact. Now that I have my two pieces, So as you can see, flipped it to where it's back to back like so before we make our fold. Just fold over about an inch, maybe an inch and a half. Doesn't have to be perfect. So we fold it over like so. We're gonna fold it one more time. Right. Fold that open, just like so. All right. Yeah, there we go here, folks. Before I move forward with this wrap, we did render our tallow out yesterday. This is about the color you want it to go. Nice, slow and low is gonna yield a nice golden color. Rendering beef fat, essentially what I like to do is that you'll chop the fat up into about quarter-sized pieces and you'll put it in a perforated pan. What you want to do is that you're going to want to put it in your oven or back on your grill at a really low temperature. You're going to render the fat from the actual physical fat pieces, and it's going to drip through into the bottom of your pan. If you do this too hot, you'll end up burning your fat and you'll be able to taste it. This will translate over. So slow and low as possible. It takes time. It's a labor of love. So now that we have our rendered fat, we're going to go ahead and baste our brisket with this. This is going to help retain its moisture throughout the braising process. So a little bit goes a long way. So we're just gonna rub it a little bit on the outside, coat it. So what I'm gonna do is try to wrap it as tight as possible. So as you pull it, wrap it right on over. Right on over. One more time. Now that we have our nice fold, now we're just gonna fold this right underneath as tight as possible. It's like a cocoon, if you will. Wrapping your brisket as tight as possible is going to ensure a nice braise, and it's going to keep some of your natural liquids from actually coming from out of the paper. And so paying attention after you did your wrap, you're not going to notice any dripping coming from underneath. Now at this point, we're going to place it right back on the grill. Try to put our probe right back where we had put it before, and we're going to raise our temperature at about 250 degrees. Right. Moving right into our pork butt. As you can see, we're at about 14 hours into it. We got a nice smoke layer that's on the top. As you can see, it's nice and caramelized. To help aid in this braising process, I'm gonna add about 8 ounces of apple juice and about 2 ounces of apple cider vinegar. The purpose of adding an acid will help cut your fat, and it won't taste as rich and heavy after the braise process. So again, you can do the same thing with this pork butt and wrap it in butcher paper and place it back on the grill. Seeing how we have all these drippings and love that's in here, I'm gonna leave it in this pan. We're gonna cover it with film and foil. Essentially, what's happening is that the braise process is still gonna take place because you're still utilizing the protein's natural liquids to cook it through. Some people say, why do you use plastic and foil? You put plastic over the top of your protein, it's gonna help seal and keep the steam inside. And this is gonna aid and speed your cooking process a little bit more. There's no real method to the madness, maybe 2 or 3 layers of film before you put your foil over the top. You'll be ready to go right back on the grill. Just like so. One or 2 pieces of foil will be plenty. Give it a nice crimp around the outside to make sure you got a nice tight seal on your container. And then we can move right back onto the grill with this. Went ahead and added an extra rack because this is where we're going to be smoking our St. Louis style ribs. Now that we got our 2 proteins refired back on the grill, we're going to turn our temperature up to about 250 degrees. And there we go. All right, now we're time to move into our spare ribs, St. Louis style. These come from Smithfield. They've already been trimmed, so we're gonna need minimal trim. So essentially all we're gonna do is unpackage them, remove the membrane, move right into our rub, and we can place them on our grill. So when it comes to barbecue pork ribs, you have options between baby back ribs and a spare rib. This is really up to you as far as which rib you do. The cooking times will vary slightly, but not drastically. Now that we have unpackaged, we're just gonna kind of go through and the little off-hanging little bits and things like that we can trim off. So just ensure for more of an even cook. Again, these trimmed ribs are very minimal trim is required. Again, just kind of look and remove little bits of fat and things like that that you may not want on your side of ribs. As you can see, these things are pretty ready to rock and roll. And so now what we need to do is remove the membrane before we rub. And for that, we have our Pit Boss rib prep tool that we're going to be utilizing to remove this membrane today. As far as entry point when it comes to stripping the ribs, I normally like to try and find an entry point on top of one of the bones because it'll give you a good solid guideline. So you can just use the point, you can get underneath the membrane. Once you can get a nice solid bite on your membrane, you can easily just, like so, peel it up. Just like so. Simple as that. Side number 2. So again, I'll try to pick my entry point right on top of the bone. You can kind of see where you can move it with your finger. And then as it starts to come up, you can kind of slide your tool underneath the membrane. If it does break, just kind of back out and go back in forward. Repetition with this tool, it can be a very useful tool in the arsenal. A little bit of practice. And if you don't have this tool yet, you can still go in and use a butter knife to get underneath the membrane and a dry towel to grip it. Works just as well. And there we go. Simple as that. Remember, you always want to have one hand dedicated to working your product and one hand dedicated for your dry rub. Nobody likes a dirty spice bottle. Today we decided to go with our Memphis rub from Pit Boss. It's a paprika and brown sugar and garlic mixture. Just gonna go on nice and even. Remember, as mentioned before, you don't want to cake your spice, you just want to put a nice even coat on it. If you put too much spice on there, you're gonna run into the risk of not getting the smoke ring that you're gonna be looking for. And plus, you like eating ribs, not spice. All right, now that you got a nice even coat, just kind of let them sit for a minute or two. Let some of the spices hydrate onto your protein and adhere. Again, you do have an option to use a binder if you wish, but it's not always necessary. Sometimes if you just let it sit a little bit, your spice will bind like so. Now that our ribs are nice and rubbed and ready to go on the grill, we're gonna place them on the center rack. Placement inside of your vertical is totally up to you. It doesn't really matter. These units cook evenly across the board. All right. Now that our ribs are on the grill, we're gonna give it about an hour and a half to put some smoke on the outside of it. Spritzing is an option. Whatever mixture you would like. Most of the time when I'm cooking pork, I like to do a 3-part mixture of apple juice and apple cider vinegar to spritz, but it's not totally necessary. Once we achieve our smoke ring on our ribs, we're gonna remove them and we're gonna wrap them in a pan and place them back on the grill to finish them through. Now that we have our big 3 back on the smoker, we're in the braise process of our pork butt and our Wagyu brisket. We raised the temperature to 250 degrees. Now that we've preheated to 250 degrees, we had fired our St. Louis ribs on the same smoker. So now we're gonna be cooking at the same rate. By the time we wrap our ribs and cook those through, all 3 proteins should be coming off relatively at the same time for the rest. Okay, so for the next hour and a half, I don't really have to sit here and babysit the grill. I'm gonna use my Pit Boss Grills app, monitor it. I'm gonna go ahead and do a little bit of socializing and just kind of come back and forth and check on it. When we return, we're gonna move right into our 3 sides that we're gonna be making on our Pro Series 1600 today. All right, guys, it's been about 2.5 hours on our ribs. We're gonna go ahead and pull them. I'm gonna place them in this aluminum foil pan right here. We're gonna baste them with some butter and add a little bit of brazing liquid. We're gonna wrap them right back up, place them right back on the grill to let them finish off. As you can see, we can get a nice little initial smoke on it. Just gonna baste it with a little bit of butter and add our brazing liquid. This here's just a little bit of melted butter that we're gonna use for the baste. You don't have to use a whole lot. You just want to add just enough to cover the top. All right, give that a nice little once over. Add about 8 ounces of apple juice and about 1 ounce of cider vinegar. Again, we're going to use a plastic and foil. The plastic's going to help seal, hold in some of that moisture. It's going to help steam and finish the braise on your ribs. All right, there we go. Now that we have our ribs basted and added our braising liquid and wrapped it in the pan, we're gonna place it back on our vertical grill for starting with about an hour and a half. After that hour and a half, we're gonna pull it and we're gonna show what we're looking for when it comes to the doneness of our ribs. All right, folks, it's been about an hour and a half. We're gonna pull our ribs and we're gonna check for doneness, and we're gonna go from there. Right after that, we're coming up on our temperatures on our brisket and our pork butt. We're right at about 205 on our pork butt, and we're at 195 on our brisket. All right, be very careful in this instance. The pan inside of it has steam in it. It hurts. Go ahead and pull this back. Oh my goodness, folks, look at that. Oh, it smells like love. Love in a pan, baby. Typically, if you like fall off the bone, you might want to cook longer to closer to 2 hours versus an hour and a half. Typically, I like my ribs to have a bite. And so you can easily just check on the end to see it'll lightly break when you bend it, and it's still full plenty of moisture. So this is a very good sign that we're ready for the rest on our ribs. Achieved a nice smoke ring, still nice and moist on the inside. We're gonna set these off to the side and allow these to rest. All right, folks, now the time has come. Our 2 big braised items are done. We're right at about 18 hours into our cook. Our pork butt is temped right at about 205, and we're at 195 on our brisket. All right, we spent all of this time and it comes to this moment. 18 hours we've been waiting for this. The very most important thing that people do not like to do is allow the rest. Your pork butt, you're gonna wanna let it rest for about an hour. Your brisket, on the other hand, you're gonna wanna let it rest at room temperature for a minimum of 2 hours. Or you can put it in the cooler. There's many ways to allow your cut to rest. One big mistake that people always do is that they unwrap their brisket and they're quick to cut into it. What's gonna happen when your brisket is still really hot, you're gonna cut into it and all of those juices that you've been slowly cooking is just gonna drain out all over your board, when really you want that to stay inside your protein and enjoy it. 2 hour minimum. But with this window we're gonna need for rest, it's gonna give us plenty of time to finish up our sides. That's gonna complete our meal in today's episode. All right, we're gonna move on to one of our first sides that we're gonna be doing. One of my favorite snacks to have is Mexican street corn. I've made a very American style version of this. And so essentially what we're gonna be doing is we're gonna be crusting corn on the cob with instant mashed potatoes. So to start this process, we have 8 ears of corn in our pan, and I have about 2 cans of condensed cream of chicken that's been watered down so it'll equal to be about a quart, 32 ounces. What we're gonna do is that we're gonna pour this right over the top of our corn. We're gonna bake it right on our pit boss, right at 350 degrees. We're gonna be rotating this every 10 to 15 minutes just so we know that it cooks through all the way. And right before we serve, we're gonna enrobe it in instant mashed potatoes, which not only gives it a buttery, awesome texture, but it definitely does resemble street corn. Now that we have this, I'm not really worried about mixing it around too much because we still have the cook process to go. We're gonna go ahead and fire this off on our Pro Series 1600. Now we're gonna move on to our next side dish that we're gonna be making in today's episode. We're gonna be making a homemade mac and cheese. So inside of this bowl, I have about 1 pound of cooked macaroni, slightly undercooked, so a little more than al dente. You just want it to be a little bit firm to the bite because you're still going to continue to cook. And so what we're going to do now, we're going to mix in about a quart of bechamel. Bechamel is one of the mother sauces. It's milk that's been thickened with a roux, and it also has onion piqué and bay leaf and garlic. We're going to set that in there just like so. I have this slightly warm. It's not cold. This is what's going to make it easy to mix. Now that we have that in there like this, in this bowl we have 1 pound of shredded white cheddar cheese. We have about 8 ounces of shredded fontina cheese and 8 ounces of shredded Gruyere cheese. So what we're going to do is we're going to take half of this mixture and we're going to mix it with our bechamel and cooked macaroni. We're going to fold that in real nice. Go ahead and fold that in real good. When it comes to making homemade mac and cheese, you can live the dream when it comes to the flavor of cheeses you like, whether you like Goudas, cheddars, mozzarellas, even American cheese is a go-to. Me, this is one of my favorite cheese combinations, and I'd encourage you to try it yourself. Now that we have a nice uniform mixture like so, we're gonna layer this in our pan in 2 layers. I'm gonna go ahead and put half of it in. I'm gonna spread that out nice and thin. Now we're gonna put some more cheese in between. Can't call it mac and cheese without plenty of cheese, right? All right, now we're just gonna go ahead and top it with the remainder of our mix. Spread that out like so. Now that we got this spread out nice and even in our pan, and here we have a mixture of melted butter, smoked paprika, and of course, some more cheese, Parmesan. Why we like to put breadcrumbs on top of our mac and cheese? Typically when you bake your mac and cheese, you don't want your macaroni to dry out on the top. When you put a seasoned breadcrumb like this over the top, this kind of helps prevent that from happening. Got about 2 cups of mixture here on the top. You don't want to put too much, just enough to cover the top. And again, on our same 1600 Pro Series Elite, we're at 350 degrees. We're going to place this on here for about a half an hour. All right, guys, before we move into our final side that we're going to be doing today, just keep in mind, always be rotating your corn as you go. That way it heats through evenly. Just like so. You're gonna notice it to have a slight simmer around the outside edges. This is normal. Right, there we go. All right, our next side, it's kind of a take on it's a savory monkey bread, I guess, if you will, except you don't have any sugar in it. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna take us some biscuits in the can, and we're gonna quarter them, and we're gonna mix it with some cheddar cheese, jalapeno, and of course, some chopped bacon. So the first thing we're gonna do is we're gonna pop open our cans of biscuits. These are the flaky ones from Pillsbury. You can use the regular buttermilk biscuits if you'd rather. I just really like how these layered biscuits taste. So simply all we're going to do is we're going to take our knife, we're just going to quarter them. Doesn't have to be perfect. And you're just going to place that into your bowl like so. Okay, now that we're at this point, we're gonna add about a half a cup of melted butter. We're gonna toss that all together. Mix it so it's all evenly coated. Now we got about 8 ounces of shredded cheddar cheese. Go ahead and add that in there. About 8 slices of cooked bacon that's been chopped. Go ahead and add that in there. And we got about 2 medium jalapenos. You can decide to leave the jalapenos out, or you can add more if you wish. Feel free to use different types of chilies. We're just gonna mix that together really good for a nice, even, uniform mixture. That's about the consistency you're looking for. All right, in front of me, I have a greased baking dish. Probably about 12 by 8. All we're gonna do is just kind of layer it in here. Doesn't have to be perfect. Just gotta lay it out evenly. All right, nothing goes to waste in this application. It all goes in the dish, folks. Now we have it placed in our pan. Just make sure it's nice and even. You don't really have to press it down. It's okay that it's fluffed up like so. Now that we're at this point, we're gonna go ahead and fire our pull apart bread on our 1600 Elite series at 350 degrees for about 20 minutes. All right, mac and cheese has been going for about 20 minutes. We're gonna take it off. I'm gonna show you what you're looking for when you're looking for a finished mac and cheese. So as you can see, you got a lazy bubble all around the outside and randomly throughout the center. This is a good sign that you're heated all the way through. So while we wait for everything else to get done, we're gonna use our handy vertical and we're gonna hold our mac and cheese warm till it's time to serve. So you can also use your indoor oven or any other apparatus that you may have in order to hold your food warm until it's mealtime. Don't forget to rotate your corn. Okay, in today's episode, we had fired off our large proteins in increments to where they're all gonna be done relatively within the same time. Keep in mind, when you pull your large proteins and allow them to rest, this is a good time to where you can start your sides. These sides that we're cooking today are not necessarily time sensitive, and so if they're done a little early, it's okay. We're just gonna migrate them over to our holding unit until it's mealtime. All right, we've been at about 25 minutes. Our last 2 sides are ready to come off and hold warm. Without further ado, it's time to see how we're doing. Oh my goodness, look at that, nice golden brown. Corn is cooked through. It's nice and coated in our cream of chicken. We're gonna go ahead and move these over to our vertical and allow them to hold warm until we're ready to serve the full meal. We've reached our time to where we can pull our pork butt. It's rested for about an hour and a half. What's a good rested temperature, you might ask? Between 140 and 150 is a good go-to temperature before you start breaking in or carving proteins that you've slowly braised. A good companion that's gonna go with your Pro Series Elite units is these cool meat claws that come in our Pitmaster set. go. And do the bone pull. It should just come out with little to no hesitation at all. As you can see, it slid right out, not sticking to anything. That's what you're looking for. So before we pull this, I'm gonna go ahead and transfer this pork butt over to our serving dish. Then we're gonna pull it, and then don't let this good braising liquid go to waste. You gotta use it. Ooh. All right. Meat claws. Just go right in there, makes it that much easier. Oh, look at that, guys. Look at that. All right. And take some of that braising liquid. We're just gonna go ahead and dress that right over the top. And there you got it, guys. Pulled pork, fall off the bone, ready to rock and roll. We're just gonna set this off to the side. We're gonna hold it warm in one of our units, and we're gonna move on to our next entree. All right, now we're gonna move into our next entree. It's gonna be our slow smoked spare ribs. We've allowed these to rest for about an hour and a half. You can see. So I'm gonna go ahead and flip this side over. When I flip it over, it's gonna make it a little bit easier for you to carve in between your ribs. So just gonna slice right down, 2 bone increments. Just like so. There you have it. Slow smoked spare ribs. We got about 4 hours on this one. All right, folks, the moment we've all been waiting for. Without further ado, we're gonna move right into our Wagyu brisket. 18 hours on a cook and a 2-hour rest. Let's see how we did. Oh yeah. Have a look at that, guys. That is something to see. Look at that. So what we're gonna do, I'm just gonna cut right across the flat and see how we did. Look at that, folks. As you can see, we retained our moisture. We achieved our smoke ring that everybody likes to talk about. Now we can carve up and get ready for our dinner. There we go. Do nice 1/2-inch slices. All right, now the last thing we're gonna do before we serve our meal, we're gonna crust our corn on the cob. We're gonna show you just how we're gonna do that. Got about 9 ounces of instant mashed potatoes. We're gonna place in a pan right here. Here I have about 4 ounces of thin sliced chive and fresh picked thyme. Give that a nice little mix in. All right, now what you're gonna wanna do is make sure each ear of corn has a nice coat of your cream of chicken love that's on here. We're gonna roll it in this instant mashed potato. Said you can't have your starch and veg in one bite. You're gonna notice as you crust it with the potato, your potato is gonna start to rehydrate. This also adds a very fun texture to this particular side dish. There we have it, guys. Herb and potato crusted corn on the cob. Happy National Barbecue Month, folks. Here's another meal, fully cooked off of our Pro Series units. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Hope you enjoyed this episode. Leave a comment below. Let us know what you would like to see on future episodes here on Pit Boss Fully Loaded.